The Dogon were cut off from the world. Cliff villages carved into stone. No written language, no machines. No observatories that know science as we know it. Yet inside their rituals, inside their ceremonies, inside the traditions they guarded like weapons, they carried a map of the invisible, a blueprint of the cosmos. They spoke of Patolo, the hidden star, Sirius's dark companion. The star they said orbits in the darkness. Not a myth, not a guess, not something whispered around fires and lost to time. A star, they said, orbits Sirius every 50 years, moves in an elongated, elliptical path, has the density of an entire mountain compressed into a space smaller than Earth. You know what that describes today? A white dwarf, Sirius B, the invisible companion, the star Western science would not confirm for nearly 900 years. But the Dogon said it first, decades before astronomy confirmed it, centuries after they claimed to have received this knowledge. And they didn't stop there. They knew Jupiter has 4 main moons. They knew Saturn is surrounded by rings. They knew planets orbit the sun, not the other way around. They knew the Milky Way is a spiral galaxy. Information, precise information, measurable, verifiable, correct. This isn't campfire storytelling. This isn't mythology passed down and distorted. This is a data set, held in memory, spoken in ritual, encoded in their masks, woven into their ceremonies, guarded like a weapon they understood but refused to use. And their timekeeping was just as precise. A sacred rope, knots tied every 5 days. Cycles of 60 years that a calendar locked onto an invisible orbit. They weren't guessing at the sky. They were tracking something they could not see, something they could not touch, something that shouldn't exist. Exactly when it would return. Exactly how long it would take to complete its journey. So here's the problem that keeps astronomers awake. Sirius B was only detected by Western science in 1862. A tiny white dot next to Sirius. Almost invisible even with a telescope. Its true nature as a white dwarf wasn't confirmed until the 1970s. Yet the Dogon, alone in those cliffs, isolated from the world, already had the complete script, already understood what it was, already calculated its orbit, already tracked it for centuries in their calendar. You're told this is impossible. That knowledge like this cannot appear in isolation. That someone must have told them. That they must have learned from European visitors. That contamination from the outside world must have corrupted their traditions. But here's what scientists discovered. The Dogon's knowledge predates the modern contact they supposedly received it from. Their traditions are too old, too detailed, too precise. The Dogon agree with you. They say someone did tell them. But it wasn't a European trader. It wasn't a missionary. It wasn't a visiting scholar. They say teachers came down from the sky. Beings from Sirius, creatures from the stars. Celestial visitors. Beings that came to Earth in the ancient past and shared forbidden knowledge. If they're lying, it's one of the greatest coincidences in human history. If they're not, then someone out there knows we exist. Someone out there knows we're here. Someone out there knows we're listening. To truly grasp the magnitude of the Dogon anomaly, we must strip away the mysticism and look at the raw data, because the correspondence between their oral tradition and modern astrophysics is too specific to be dismissed as mere coincidence. While Western astronomers in the mid-19th century were still debating the existence of Sirius B based on mathematical wobbles in the main star's path, the Dogon had already codified its characteristics into their daily life, describing Patolo as a star that revolves around Sirius A in an elliptical orbit every 50 years, a fact they commemorated with the Sigue festival, which occurs, inexplicably, exactly every 60 years, a slight deviation that some argue represents a symbolic rather than literal count. Yet the core period remains hauntingly close to the 50.1-year cycle confirmed by NASA. Even more disturbing is their description of the star's composition. They do not describe it as a spirit or a ghost, but as physical matter, asserting that the star is composed of a metal called Sagala, which is heavier than all the iron on Earth. A frighteningly accurate layman's description of degenerate matter, the supercompressed state of a white dwarf where a teaspoon of material weighs tons. This isn't the vague poetry of ancient myth where stars are gods or campfires. This is hard science wrapped in ritual, a specific understanding of orbital mechanics and stellar density that requires a level of physics completely absent from the rest of their culture. The Dogon even went further, describing a third star in the system, Emme, a claim that was long ridiculed by astronomers until recent studies in the 1990s suggested that a third, smaller red dwarf might actually exist in the Sirius system, raising the chilling possibility that the Dogon are not just repeating what they saw, but what they were told by someone who had been there. However, the narrative of the space tribe faces a formidable adversary in the form of skepticism and the messy reality of cultural contamination, challenging us to ask whether the Dogon mystery is a genuine ancient anomaly or a 20th century misunderstanding magnified by our desire to believe. Skeptics, led by anthropologist Walter van Beek and astronomer Carl Sagan, point out a glaring vulnerability in Griaule's timeline. The Dogon had been in contact with French missionaries, schools, and even soldiers returning from World War I long before Oannes sat down in the dust to draw his diagrams. It is entirely possible, they argue, that a curious Dogon elder learned about the invisible companion of Sirius from a visiting European fascinated by astronomy, incorporated this dazzling new information into the tribe's fluid oral history, and then fed it back to Griaule years later, creating a feedback loop where modern science was mistaken for ancient wisdom. This contamination hypothesis is supported by the fact that other Dogon astronomical claims are suspiciously wrong or absent. They know about the moons of Jupiter and the rings of Saturn, objects visible with basic European binoculars, but fail to mention the outer planets like Neptune or Uranus, which require stronger telescopes, suggesting their knowledge has a very human optical limit consistent with 1920s textbooks. Furthermore, Van Beek's later fieldwork found that most Dogon had no idea what Sirius B was, suggesting this secret knowledge might have been isolated to a small group of Griaule's informants or even co-created during their intense, leading conversations. The tragedy of this explanation is that it strips the magic away, reducing the Nommo from interstellar teachers to misinterpreted missionaries. Yet it cannot fully explain why Oannes' data was so specific about density and orbits, details that a casual conversation would rarely convey with such mathematical weight. Ultimately, the Dogon enigma leaves us stranded between two equally uncomfortable conclusions, neither of which fully satisfies the burden of proof, forcing us to choose between a history-shattering anomaly and a depressing case of cultural pollution. If we accept the skeptics, we must dismiss the sheer statistical improbability of the Dogon, guessing the correct orbital period and density of a white dwarf, and we must accept that a few conversations with missionaries were enough to rewrite a tribe's entire religious structure in a single generation, a speed of cultural assimilation that is almost as unbelievable as the alien theory itself. On the other hand, if we embrace the ancient astronaut or lost civilization angle, we are forced to rewrite the history of the human species, accepting that a remote African tribe maintained a pristine stream of data for thousands of years without writing, preserving the coordinates of a star system that no human eye could see until the Victorian era. Perhaps the truth lies in a stranger middle ground, where the Dogon are the last inheritors of a forgotten terrestrial legacy, remnants of an ancient, high-tech human civilization like Atlantis or Kemet that mapped the stars before the ice caps melted, leaving fragments of their science to be encoded in the myths of survivors. The Dogon tell us that the Nommo will return one day to rule the world from the waters, a prophecy that keeps their eyes fixed on the sky, waiting for the invisible star to speak again. Whether they are looking for aliens, ancestors, or just the reflection of our own modern dreams, the Dogon have achieved immortality, ensuring that as long as humanity looks at Sirius, we will be forced to look at them, wondering if they know something about the dark spaces between the stars that we are only just beginning to learn. The silence of the desert offers no final answer, only the wind whistling through the cliffs, carrying the whisper of a secret that might be the key to our past, or merely a trick of the light. While the skepticism surrounding the Dogon's knowledge of Sirius B is often rooted in the possibility of lucky guesses or contamination, their cosmology ventures even further into the impossible with the insistence on a third stellar body, Emme, or the Star of Women. For decades, this claim was the primary weapon of critics who pointed out that modern astronomy saw no trace of a second companion in the system, yet the Dogon remained adamant, describing Emme as a reddish star that orbits Sirius A in a larger trajectory than the white dwarf. acting as a lightweight counterbalance in the trinary dance. The scientific laughter began to fade in 1995 when French astronomers Benest and Dogon published a study analyzing years of gravitational perturbations in the Sirius system, concluding that a small, red dwarf star likely does exist, lurking in the precise location where the Dogon placed it centuries ago. If this third star is eventually photographed and confirmed, the lucky guess hypothesis evaporates completely, leaving us with the terrifying realization that an isolated West African tribe possessed a complete orbital map of a star system 8.6 light-years away, cataloging invisible celestial bodies that our most advanced observatories are only just beginning to detect.